After hanging up the phone, my phone vibrated twice. I picked it up to see a message from Julian. Company's got overtime. Go ahead and sleep. No need to wait up for me. Then, the cute avatar marked V popped up. Meli. No need to leave the door open for me tonight. I have plans. A playful you know what I mean sticker followed. I gripped the phone tightly, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the two of them hug and kiss eagerly as soon as they got downstairs, suppressing the nauseating feeling rising in my throat. Not long ago, Virginia told me she was in a relationship with a guy who was 1.8 meters tall, very big, but rough in bed, always leaving her with a sore back and waist. At the time, I honestly congratulated her, jokingly saying, "Bigger is better," not noticing the mockery and sarcasm hidden in her gaze. It wasn't until a few days ago, when I accidentally stumbled upon their affair, that I saw the two of them entwined and kissing like a couple of enemies behind my back, their saliva practically stretching. I couldn't hold back the tears, and they just rolled down my face. Chapter 1. I covered my mouth, standing outside the door, biting my lips until they bled to control the impulse to storm in. Listening to the sounds coming from inside, my eyes turned red. It turned out that my gentle and honest boyfriend liked to play all these games. Uniforms with black stockings. No wonder my back and waist hurt. I closed my eyes, trying my best to control myself, but my body still trembled uncontrollably. To friends and family, Julian was the perfect boyfriend. And Virginia, not only my college roommate but also my best friend. No one would believe they were seeing each other. But ironically, I was the one betrayed by both. When I didn't reply to his message, Julian called. I looked at the caller ID, wiped my tears from the corner of my eyes, and answered the call as casually as I could. "Baby, why haven't you replied to my message?" I absent-mindedly made an excuse, gripping the phone tightly, trying one last time. "What should I do, babe? V said she's meeting up with that guy tonight. Should I tell her to come back?" Julian's breath became a little heavier. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or if Virginia had shown him some new tricks. "She's an adult. She knows what to do. Why are you worrying so much?" I dragged the conversation out for a little longer, and his breathing grew heavier. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore and quickly said, "Work stuff. I have to go," and hung up the phone. I stared at the ended call, and the last shred of affection in my heart was erased. Since they wanted to play the roles of the scumbag man and the shameless woman, then I would expose their true faces to everyone. Julian came back the next morning, carrying my favorite small steamed buns in his hand. He casually put the breakfast on the table. "Got this for you. Eat it while it's hot." I didn't say anything, and of course, I didn't touch the buns. A moment later, I heard a man's voice from the bedroom. "Baby, where's your clothes?" Julian came out to the living room and saw the suitcase by my feet. His expression stiffened for a moment, but then he relaxed and said, "Are you planning to travel? I've saved up vacation days. Might as well take some time off and go on a trip." That's when Virginia came back. "Travel? Julian, are you planning to take Meli out somewhere?" "Ugh, I envy you guys so much. Poor me, a single dog, stuck at home guarding the house." She pouted, and before I could speak, she came over and hooked her arm around mine, smiling brightly. "How about Meli? Be a good friend and take me along, too." Julian's face darkened. "What's it got to do with you? Don't be a third wheel." Virginia wasn't fazed and retorted without hesitation. "I'm not going with you. I'm going with Meli." Then she shook my arm and acted all cute. "Meli, please. You wouldn't want to leave me home alone, would you?" I looked at the back and forth between them and couldn't help but find it laughable. When Virginia came to look for a job here and said she had no place to stay, I kindly offered her a place to stay at my house. When Julian first heard about it, the look of disgust on his face was unmistakable. I had to coax him for a long time, cooking him meals and giving him massages before he reluctantly agreed. Who would have thought that these two, who always pretended to argue in front of me, were actually rolling in the sheets behind my back? Chapter 2. I pulled my arm out of Virginia's grasp and said nonchalantly, "I'm not going on a vacation. The company is sending me to Nanching for a year of training. When I come back, I'll be up for a promotion and a raise. This time, I didn't miss the flash of jealousy that passed through Virginia's eyes. My heart turned cold. I treated her as a good friend and helped her in every way, but she couldn't stand to see me do well. Before Virginia could say anything, Julian became upset, frowning as he looked at me disapprovingly. We agreed you weren't going before. We're about to get married. What do you think going away for a whole year will do? We had been together for 3 years. Now, with our work stable, Julian's parents were pressuring us to get married so they could have grandchildren. My parents were relatively satisfied with Julian, but there was one thing they worried about, that I might give up my career for love. Now it seemed their concerns were justified. I smiled faintly and said, "We're still young. Marriage isn't urgent. This opportunity is rare, and I don't want to pass it up. Besides, if I get a promotion and a raise when I come back, wouldn't it be better for us to get married then?" Julian, rarely getting angry, retorted, "Do you think I can't afford to take care of you?" I didn't answer. Julian's salary, aside from car loans and his personal expenses, barely left him with a few $100s. Was he planning to support me on that? I wasn't sure how he could even say such a thing. Seeing my firm attitude, Julian's face darkened, and he muttered, "Do whatever you want." Before storming out, the door slammed with a loud bang. Virginia pretended to be concerned. "Meli, maybe you should reconsider. After all, you two are getting married, and leaving now might not be the best idea." I looked at her expressionlessly and asked bluntly, "Are you on my side or his?" Virginia, who had always considered herself my best friend, naturally wouldn't destroy her image at this moment. She softened her tone, leaning in to comfort me. "Of course, I'm on your side. If I had known Julian would turn out like this, I never would have introduced you to him. But Meli," she switched to a more sorrowful tone, "a year is a long time. Long-distance relationships are the least reliable. What if during that time, Julian..." I could tell from her expression that Virginia didn't want me to get the promotion or raise. Yet she still wanted to keep Julian around. I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. I lowered my gaze, hiding the mockery in my eyes. Let her have this kind of man. It's fine. You'll be here, right? I suppressed my disgust and held her hand, looking at her with feigned sincerity. "While I'm gone, you can keep an eye on Julian. If anything happens, just report back to me." "But..." Virginia feigned hesitation. I smiled and said, "Didn't you like the L brand bag? Think of it as my reward for hiring you to keep an eye on Julian for a year." I had always been generous with Virginia, always thinking to share any good fortune with her. Unfortunately, all my goodwill was wasted. A look of joy sparkled in Virginia's eyes, though she kept up her considerate act. "We're sisters. Why worry about these things? You go ahead. I'll make sure everything with him is fine." I nodded, smiling, while Virginia was lost in excitement about getting a new bag. She didn't notice the coldness in my eyes. Chapter 3. I had already set up surveillance cameras in the hidden corners of the house. Leaving for a year, I didn't believe these two cheaters, who had been sneaking around under my nose, could resist their temptation. I'm not sure how Virginia convinced Julian, but on the day I left, the man actually came to the airport to see me off. Though his face was still dark, I pretended to be upset. "Honey, wait for me to come back. A year will pass quickly." Julian's face remained cold. "If you have to go, there's nothing I can do. But you should figure out how to explain this to my mom." I pressed my lips together, silently mocking him. It wouldn't be so easy to explain things when the time came. Virginia shot Julian a glare, then hugged me affectionately as we said our goodbyes. "Meli, make sure to take good care of yourself over there. I'll miss you." I nodded. "I will." Then I lowered my voice and whispered in her ear, "I've already placed the bag in your room. Make sure you check it when you get back." Virginia's eyes lit up, and she waved goodbye to me with reluctance. I walked through security and into the boarding gate, with their eyes on me. It wasn't until the plane landed that I opened the surveillance app on my phone. As expected, the moment they got home, they couldn't wait to jump into bed together. With my departure, they became even bolder, trying every spot from the living room to the kitchen. Any place with a support point has been tried by them. I held back my disgust as I saved the video, quickly coded it, and then forwarded it to Julian's family and friends group. Chapter 4. Caption: Congrats to my husband for finding a new lover. Then I sent Julian a breakup message, deleted and blocked him, all in one swift motion. The training in Nanching was progressing smoothly. Without Julian and Virginia, those two giant babies, I no longer had to deal with endless household chores or stress over what to cook every day. Life was much more comfortable, until one evening, when I came home from work and saw Julian with his parents downstairs in the new apartment I had rented. They were all holding big bags of things. Julian's face was grim, and when he saw me, he glared at me, but was immediately slapped on the forehead by his mother. "Lynn, what are you standing there for? Go apologize to Meli," she scolded Julian. And then, when she turned to me, her face softened with a smile. "Meli, we've already had a talk with this boy. Could you please give him another chance?" she said, pushing the bags into my arms. "Look, we bought these for you. Julian said you like them." I looked at the branded bags, a hint of sarcasm flashing in my eyes. We'd been in a relationship for 3 years, and Julian had never bought me anything expensive. In fact, he would criticize me for stocking up on things during sales. Women are different. You don't have to support the family, unlike us men who have to count every penny. I didn't want to argue, so I kept silent. But Julian, seeing that I didn't resist, got even more worked up. "Melissa, let me tell you, who else about to get married spends money like you? Do you even know how to manage your finances?" Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. "I'm not spending your money. And by the way, when I saw you throwing money into your video games, you didn't hesitate at all. Why should you lecture me?" Julian's expression froze for a moment. Then he weakly replied, "I'm just thinking about our future. Think about it, once we get married and have kids, we'll need to have some savings, right?" At that moment, I wasn't happy. But since he had been considerate to me in other ways, I didn't argue. But a few days later, I saw Virginia wearing a pair of Bulgari earrings. I was surprised. She hadn't even settled into her job yet. So how could she afford such an extravagant item? I casually asked her about it. Virginia's eyes flickered, and she absent-mindedly touched her ear while replying, "Oh, these? A simp bought them for me. Pretty. Huh?" I recognized the earrings. Later, I found a matching pair in Julian's shopping history. When I asked him about it, he said, "My boss's birthday is coming up, and she's still in charge of my promotion, so I thought I'd buy a gift to score some points. You were busy at the time, so I asked Virginia for help." Julian hugged me. "Once I get promoted, I'll buy you one too." I quickly waved my hand, saying I didn't need it. A pair of earrings costing nearly 10,000 yuan was too extravagant, especially since I didn't even have pierced ears. Hearing this, Julian hugged me tightly and proudly said, "When I get promoted, I'll buy whatever you want." Looking back now, it was just like a dream my boss kept dangling in front of me. Oh, there's one difference. At least I got paid for the work I did for my boss. But with Julian, I was just working for free, like a free nanny. Now that we've broken up, he's willing to spend big money to win me back. I stared coldly at him. "Mr. and Mrs., you've already seen the video. I will never be with a man who has betrayed me." Chapter 5. As soon as Julian heard that, he became anxious, glaring at me with dissatisfaction. "Do you realize that your actions have violated my privacy? I could sue you for this." Before I could respond, Mr. Lin scolded him. "We're family. Why are you talking about suing? If you hadn't done something so disgraceful, Meli wouldn't have had a reason to want to harm you." Mrs. Lin also came over and tried to take my hand. "Meli, you've been with Julian for 3 years now, and you've had a good relationship. It's almost time for you two to settle down. It'd be such a waste to give up now." "Don't worry," she said with determination. "I only recognize you as my daughter-in-law. As for those shameless mistresses out there, they better not think about stepping foot into the Lin family home. If it wasn't for the bragging email Virginia sent me a couple of days ago, I might have actually believed her." I pulled my arm away and said calmly, "Mrs. Lin, my relationship with Julian has come to an end. There's no point in forcing it any longer." Seeing my resolute attitude, Mrs. Lin's expression slowly changed, and her voice grew shrill. "Melissa, You've been living with my son for a year. You've already been used up. A second-hand product. Do you really think anyone would want you now that you're leaving my son? I laughed in anger. If that's the case, your son's even worse. He's slept with multiple women, and who knows what kind of diseases he might have picked up. I said coldly, "Get out, or I'll call the police for harassment." Mrs. Lin's face turned red with rage, her hand shaking as she pointed at me. "You! How dare you speak to me like that?" I sneered and took out my phone, opening the photos Virginia had sent me. The photos showed Virginia and Mrs. Lin together, arm in arm, happily shopping at the mall, looking like a mother and daughter. Birds of a feather flock together. You both put on a different face in front of me but act all cozy behind my back. It's truly disgusting. I mocked. In the past, for Julian's sake, I had always bent over backward in front of his parents, showering them with gifts every holiday. But what did that get me in return? I knew full well that Virginia was a mistress, but she still got cozy with her family, and now they shamelessly come to beg me to reconcile. This was a new low for me. When Mrs. Lin saw that photo, she was speechless, her eyes burning with resentment as she glared at me. Julian, who was focused on his career and his reputation, dragged Mrs. Lin out in embarrassment. I thought that would be the end of it. But the next day, while I was in class, I heard a commotion downstairs. A crowd of people who had gone out for lunch gathered by the entrance. Watching the spectacle, a colleague came running over to find me. "Meli, you should go downstairs. There's a woman claiming to be your mother-in-law." Crying and holding a banner outside the main entrance. Chapter 6. My brain was buzzing as I grabbed my phone and rushed downstairs. Before I could squeeze into the crowd, I saw a bright red banner with large characters printed on it. "Melissa spent all my son's savings," then turned around to cling to her boss, abandoning her fiancé. My vision blurred, and I nearly fainted. Thankfully, a colleague next to me helped steady me, so I didn't fall. I don't know who shouted "Melissa's here," but the crowd that was previously packed so tightly suddenly parted, clearing a path for me. I looked at Mrs. Lin, who was kneeling on the ground, crying uncontrollably, and I almost doubted whether I had actually wronged Julian in some way. "Meli, my daughter-in-law." Mrs. Lin's eyes lit up as she saw me. She hurriedly stood and ran toward me, then suddenly dropped to her knees in front of me, kowtowing and clutching my legs, wailing, "Meli, please, give my son a chance. You've been together for 3 years. And in that time, he's spent enough money on you to buy a house. You can't be this cruel, just walking away from him like that." I didn't expect an old woman's movements to be so swift and smooth, leaving me no chance to avoid her. The voices of the crowd around me kept ringing in my ears. "This girl looks all proper, but turns out her character is this bad. Yeah, she got all this money from him. He was planning marriage, and then she hooks up with someone better. And now won't even marry him? If she's not marrying him, she should return the money." Exactly. A gold digger. Disgusting. Some people were even filming with their phones, declaring with righteous indignation, "People like her should be exposed. Let everyone see her true face." I had lived more than 20 years and had never seen anything like this. Mrs. Lin saw that the crowd was on her side and played it up even more. "Meli, we're not blaming you. It's just that all that money was from me and his father's pension. You spent it all on bags. And now we can't even afford our medicine. We had no choice but to come find you." She wiped her tears, her shabby clothes clearly scavenged from some corner. I forced myself to hold back my anger. "Get up. No, Meli, please forgive my son. No matter what mistakes he made before, he truly loves you." The crowd around us instantly erupted. "Lady, why would you want such a woman? Just sue her and make her return the money. Yeah, she's using him to climb the social ladder, such a gold digger. I wouldn't even want to look at her." I listened to the insults surrounding me, but my mind started to cool down. If what Mrs. Lin said were true, she could easily take me to court and demand the money back, rather than causing a scene at my workplace. Her real intention was clearly not to get me to return the money, but to embarrass me and slander my reputation. If your conscience is clear, you have nothing to fear from shadows. Since she wanted to make a scene, I would entertain her. Let's see who comes out looking guilty in the end. Quickly, I pinched the flesh on my thigh hidden under my sleeve. The pain made tears spring to my eyes immediately. Chapter 7. Madam, you don't understand. It's all a misunderstanding. It was Julian who, I said, tearing up. You said he spent all that money on me, but I didn't take a single penny from him. As I spoke, I pulled out my phone and displayed the 3-year spending record. Thankfully, I had the habit of keeping accounts, or I'd be in trouble now. Look, these are all the expenses from our 3 years together. I've recorded everything clearly. Julian only bought me a 99 yuan bouquet and a 399 yuan silver necklace on Valentine's Day. I raised my voice. I bought him a 4090 graphics card. You see, I really didn't spend any of his money. Mrs. Lin looked at the detailed and clear statements. Her throat seemed to be blocked by a stone, and she stammered, unable to speak, as the crowd around her started casting suspicious glances. Mrs. Lin panicked and tried to recover, wiping her tears as she said, "If my son didn't spend money on you, then where did all our savings go? That's our lifetime's hard-earned money." I grabbed her hand and swore, "Don't worry, madam. I'll call the police. Let them investigate where the money went." Mrs. Lin's eyes widened in horror, and she nearly gasped for air. "No, don't call the police." I looked at her in confusion, even trying to calm her down. "Madam, I understand that older generations think calling the police isn't good, but like you said, this money is your and your husband's lifetime savings. It can't just disappear without explanation, and it's not a small amount. The police will investigate it quickly." As I spoke, I pressed 110 on my phone, just about to dial, but before I could, Mrs. Lin quickly jumped up and grabbed my hand. I pretended not to see her trembling lips and deliberately asked, "Madam, what's wrong?" Mrs. Lin gritted her teeth. "Meli, I know you mean well, but there might be some misunderstanding here." "Misunderstanding?" I dragged the word out. "Yes. I'll go back and ask Julian. I'll ask him." I pretended to hesitate. "So what about today's incident?" Mrs. Lin hurriedly said. "It's my fault. Everyone, please leave. Just go." She hastily tore down the banner and fled, her tail between her legs. The crowd slowly dispersed, and my colleagues looked at me with admiration, giving me a thumbs up. "We thought this would be a big deal, but you handled it so quickly." I smiled at them without saying anything. "By the way, did your ex really only buy you these things after 3 years together?" I nodded. My colleague frowned in disgust. "So cheap and poor, and his family's like that too. What did you even see in him?" I thought for a moment. Maybe I thought he was responsible? Upon hearing this, my colleague's eyes widened in shock. "That's called responsible?" I smiled but couldn't help recalling when I first met Julian. Virginia had gone out to a bar one night, got drunk, and called me to pick her up while I was carrying her out. We were harassed by a tipsy guy with bleached hair. It was Julian who came to our rescue. Later, Virginia said she wanted to introduce me to a friend. I wasn't very interested, but when I saw it was him, I was a little surprised. We hit it off well. Even our hobbies and interests were quite similar. Suddenly, the ringtone of my phone interrupted my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID, and it was Julian. Chapter 8. As soon as I answered, Julian's scolding voice came through the receiver. "Melissa, do you know my mom has heart disease? How could you upset her like that?" I couldn't help but roll my eyes. "It was your mom who came to my office building and spread rumors and caused a scene." "So what?" Julian responded defiantly. "She's an elder. Is this how you treat elders?" "Stop," I retorted sarcastically. "I don't have those unreasonable elders. And we've already broken up. We're practically strangers now. So stop trying to disgust me." I heard Julian's heavy breathing on the other end. Probably furious, he abruptly hung up the phone. I smirked, not caring at all. A few days later, after finishing a report, my boss stopped me just as I was about to leave. "Xiao Jiang, you did well on this case. Your salary is doubled this month. Go directly to HR to collect it, along with your previous bonus." I frowned, feeling like there was more to this. When I went to HR, the receptionist handed me a resignation letter. I clenched my fists. Why do I need to leave? The HR officer gave me a strange look and said, "Don't you know?" My brow furrowed. What was I supposed to know? She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. "This is the video that's gone viral online. Watch it." I clicked on it and was shocked to see it was the video of Mrs. Lin causing a scene downstairs at my office. The video cut out the beginning and end, leaving only the part where Mrs. Lin was crying, dramatically accusing me. The comments section was filled with people sympathizing with Mrs. Lin. Poor elderly lady. Which shameless woman is so heartless to steal the elderly's retirement money? These gold diggers are everywhere nowadays. I curse her entire family. Don't be sad, elderly lady. Is there a donation channel? I'll donate. There were countless similar comments. The HR officer sighed and said, "You see, the company is under a lot of pressure. Because of this incident, the company's official Weibo is being flooded with comments. If we don't respond soon, it will cause even greater losses." I clenched my fists. "Don't worry. Give me 3 more days. If things aren't resolved by then, I'll resign voluntarily." Chapter 9. That evening, I gathered all the evidence I had and made a PowerPoint presentation, then registered a Weibo account. I casually scrolled through the platform and was shocked to see Julian and Virginia doing a live stream, playing the victim. Virginia, seeing the opportunity for some attention, exposed me as a bully in college, claiming I didn't care about my studies and had a whole list of dark secrets. Yeah, she never flushes the toilet after using it. I wanted to remind her, but I didn't know how to bring it up. And those classmates who were bullied by her, I really want to apologize to them. I wanted to help them, but I was threatened by Melissa. So, sniffle, I'm so sorry. Everyone, Melissa cried, her makeup nearly ruined by her tears. But as soon as it looked like her makeup might smudge, she quickly grabbed a tissue to wipe her face. And, of course, many viewers believed her. Don't cry, miss. You're the real victim. It's already so brave of you to stand up and speak out. When will these bullies ever get what they deserve? By the way, I haven't heard any news from that company. What kind of background does this Melissa have behind her? I gritted my teeth and switched over to Julian's stream. He was using the same trick, playing the heartbroken character while subtly leaking more of my dark history. Julian was somewhat handsome, and when he looked into the camera with that emotional expression, he really did look like a character from a drama. Seeing comments like "Melissa deserves to die," "handsome guy, don't love her, love me instead," I couldn't help but laugh. My phone vibrated. It was a call from my parents. They had heard some rumors and were really worried about me. I reassured them and then contacted a popular influencer who was known for stirring up drama online. I told them I had even more explosive material that would easily turn the tide and guarantee them a flood of views. The influencer quickly agreed and set up a live stream for 7 p.m. the next evening. I made my preparations and waited for the show to begin. Chapter 10. As expected from a professional influencer, they released a teaser during the day, attracting a lot of attention. By the time the live stream started that evening, the number of viewers had already surpassed 100,000. I pressed the button to join the stream. Once connected, facing the camera, I calmly said, "Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa, the person involved in the recent kneeling incident." The comments section was immediately flooded with offensive language and insults. I continued, "Now, I'm releasing the full video of the kneeling incident, along with a detailed list of all the money my ex-boyfriend Julian spent on me during our relationship." The 2 files appeared on the screen. The comments froze for a second, then exploded in a frenzy. What the hell? So this is what the full video looks like? This family is crazy. He only spent a few bucks and still claims to love her? The female lead even bought him a 4090 graphics card. Who'll buy one for me? Sniff? Just then, my phone rang madly. It was Julian calling. I ignored it. Then someone in the comments said, "Even if this is fake, what about your college bullying scandal? Your best friend herself said it." I chuckled. What best friend? The one who climbed into bed with my boyfriend while I was on a business trip? The whole chat was in shock. What? Climbed into bed? I quickly summarized how Virginia had stayed at my place while looking for a job, and how those two had secretly gotten together right under my nose. My phone vibrated violently, full of abusive messages from Virginia and Julian. I turned a deaf ear and continued talking. My ex-boyfriend and my so-called best friend are both from the same hometown. They thought I couldn't understand their dialect. But what they didn't know is that I learned the dialect to win his parents over. I looked into the camera, a sarcastic smile playing on my lips. So, how do you like Mr. Lin and Miss Ma's nurse uniforms and black stockings? Chapter 11. The twist came too quickly, and the truth was too shocking. The discussion online continued for a week, and the heat hadn't died down. Julian was fired from his workplace due to issues with his personal conduct. His mother, who used to proudly announce my son is a civil servant, lost her bragging rights. Instead, she found herself the subject of gossip and criticism from relatives and friends, all because of the viral video. In the end, the entire family couldn't bear the pressure and fled back to their rural hometown. As for Virginia, I encountered her again in a bar. I had come to relax with some friends, but there she was, surrounded by a few greasy middle-aged men, who were feeding her drinks. Several hands were groping her body. When she saw me, she instinctively tried to hide, but one of the men slapped her hard, cursing at her as he did. "You shameless bitch. I paid for your drinks, and you dare try to hide?" I looked at Virginia, now kneeling on the floor like a dog, and shook my head. Before leaving, I ran into her in the hallway. I didn't want to engage with her, but she called out to me, "Melissa." I turned and looked at her. "What is it? Why do you get to live so well?" She stared at me with jealousy. "Do you know? I never even liked Julian. I just wanted to make things difficult for you." I nodded blankly. Julian wasn't even her type, so I was surprised when they ended up together. She stared at me and suddenly smiled. "You don't know, do you? That punk from back then? Julian actually hired him on purpose to get close to you." After a long pause, seeing that I didn't react, Virginia lost it. "Why aren't you upset?" I tilted my head. Why should I be upset? It was just the realization that a rotten person was rotten to the core. What was there to be upset about? I didn't bother with the frantic Virginia, turning and walking away. The road ahead is long, and I have to keep moving forward, step by step.